I love Donnie just like a brother, and we had the opportunity to become very close for many years, well over 60 years. And I just wanted to give you a little history of how he got here, in case you don't know the actual facts. I got them directly from my uncle, Walter Short, who was stationed here in this station from 1955 until they opened up a new station in Takes Creek. But the way it all started was Donnie lived with his mother at the second house on Woodland Avenue on the other side of Euclid Avenue. And she had been a widow for a while, and just it was her and Donnie. And she would often take him up to Woodland Park. They would make walks, and they'd go by the firehouse, and they would spend time in the park. There was always something going on over there. So as he passed by, he'd look in and those sorts of things, but he never came in. And so when Engine 7 was the truck that Engine 5 was there, and Engine 7 was brand new in 55, and it had to run out of here because Station 7 hadn't been built. But they knew that it would because they were annexing Takes Creek Pike and ultimately Gainesway subdivision. So when the Engine 7 would go down Woodland Avenue, they'd see this young boy standing in the front yard behind a fence. And he would always wave. And they waved back and they rang the bell, and they could see that he was a special child. And so one day they decided to stop and let him see the truck, like everyone done stationed in a building where we've worked. We've had children come in, and we spend time with them, running the lights, ringing the bell, running the siren, anything to keep a child entertained and happy. So my uncle went up and knocked on the door and met his mom. And he identified himself and said, "We'd like to show Donnie, or this boy, the truck, but he needs to come out, and we want your permission for him to be out of the yard." And she allowed it, and she came out and she met Joe and the other person on the truck, and he loved that. They let him get in the front seat and ring the bell. Well, they visited a while, and they said, "We have to get on back, and you're invited to come to the station anytime. You bring Donnie anytime, and he'll always be welcome." So a few times as they went to the park, she would see somebody down here on the first floor. She came in a few times, and he got to see the trucks. And people could just see in his expressions how happy that made him. Donnie had a difficult time speaking, and years ago, when I first met him, you couldn't understand a thing he said. He had been deaf since birth, and he didn't get hearing aids till later, so he never learned to talk. He didn't hear words like we hear words. So he would make a noise, but eventually, if you were fortunate enough like me to be around him a little while, you could figure him out, and I'm sure all of you all have. But he came and started visiting with her, and they convinced her that he could walk up here on his own. She see that he got through the intersection safely, but he would come directly here. He would spend the time, and back then they had a couple of couches like this that sat in the corner behind Engine 7, and the TV was over here. And while he was allowed to sit on the truck, the crews would be in this area where they never heard him try to start the truck or turn a switch or do anything that he wasn't allowed to do. They had ground rules, and he understood us. We just didn't understand him. So he could sit there for an hour and not make a noise, just dreaming, I guess, about that truck. So after he got to coming on a real regular basis, which became soon 7 days a week, they bought him some uniforms. And back in those days, they wore a Navy uniform. It was denims for pants and a light blue long sleeve shirt. They got him a name tag and a hat. And he felt a part of the crew. And he was. And he'd sit in that truck or talk to these people. And everybody just started loving on Donnie. And it wasn't long until they started trying to teach Donnie how to count, because he had never gone to school. And they took him up to the green board, and they finally, after a period of time, got him to write his numbers 1 through 10. And I mean, he was just the most important guy around here for a long time. Well, I came by one day, it was in the 1960, I think, and I had a need to visit my uncle, and I stopped and I came through and I got introduced. I didn't hear a thing. I don't hear anything today. I'm deaf now, but I couldn't understand a word Donnie had to say. But he saw this old car I came in, which was a 47 Ford, and I found out that day he loved anything with wheels. He wanted to know all about that car before I left, or before I had planned to leave. So I told him about it, showed it to him, and he sat in it. And we were here longer than I intended, but I got ready to leave, and Walter told me that he needs to be home because Miss Ridley had sent papers that she wanted him home at a certain time, so she didn't have to worry. So I took him home in that car. He never forgot that ride in that 47 Ford. So we kept up with each other a little bit. I'd stop in periodically, and I'd hit him sometimes. I'd be here. He'd be here when I was, and other times Walter would just update me on him because I really liked that kid. Well, when I came on the job, I was assigned to Station 1. I'll try to make this brief, but I was on the job for a year down at Station 1 before I went on a buggy. 150 was an old homemade ambulance we had that we ran. Well, we came over here to show Donnie that truck. That made his day. It was a brand new 64 Dodge truck. So again, he did like he always did the trucks. He wanted to sit in it. You turned, made sure the engine was off, but you let him sit under the wheel, and he'd just sit there and stare like he was doing something. But he was happy. And that made everybody else happy when Donnie was happy. So we got a station wagon 5 or 6 years later, and I brought that over. He would never get in the back. He didn't want anything to do where that stretcher was. I think he thought we'd take him away and put him in the hospital. But he would sit in the front seat, the driver's side, and the officer's side. Well, we weren't officers on the buggy in those days. You just rode it and you were in charge or not in charge. You were appointed and you did it. Then the modulars came along, and he really loved that. I was on EC4 out of 6. That was before the merger, and he loved those big new trucks. But again, he never would get in that back. You couldn't throw him in that thing. And he'd open either door, the back or the side. He'd just look in there and glow, but you couldn't push him in. But he loved to sit in the front. So I was blessed that I got sent to 5 when I got through with those 12 or 13 years, whatever. And I really got to know the boy Donnie Ridley. And I loved him like my uncle loved him. You could just see the honesty in this kid, the sincerity in this person, and how much he loved firemen and fire trucks. So we all became really good buddies. I had a real good crew then, and he became part of that crew. And when we would clean the kitchen at night, nobody touched the broom. Donnie was in charge of sweeping. He did a great job at that. And then at some point, he started taking the flag down. And he learned how to fold it, not just hold it, he learned how to fold it. Then the 8 o'clock test came, and we got Brave, or somebody did, and allowed him to answer that. Once he did that, he was hooked. Because nobody downtown could understand anything. And they thought we'd been hijacked. And all you could hear was 10, 4, 5. And they called out and said, who's on the phone, or who's on the radio? And we told him who it was and how special he was. Everybody accepted it. No one ever questioned it in the alarm room that I heard about who was answering the call on Station 5's radio check. Then we had other things around here that he enjoyed participating with. It just slips my mind now, the rest, but those were the most important. He loved to come, check out the trucks, take down the flag, answer the radio, and get ready about 5 or 10 after 8 to leave at 8:15. When he first started, he couldn't tell time, but he knew the hands on the clock. He had been told by those working here that says 8 o'clock, or that says get ready to go. And you couldn't hardly hold him in here at 8:15. And Chief will verify, I had some jokesters that used to try to delay him. Now, that was one thing that would get him hot, buddy, because he had promised his mother, who then they lived on Park Avenue. They had moved from Woodland to Park. He had promised her that he would be home at 8:30. And I'm not sure that he was ever late. Never heard about that. But O'Brien and Hogue and 2 or 3 others would try to find ways to keep him upstairs or anything. And you could really get, he had a temper. There's his family over there. He had a temper. You couldn't understand that either, but he knew he was in pretty good shape.
He was like you to her about it.
Yeah. And when he wanted to move you, he could move you, and he did. But we all loved him dearly. So then I retired in 93, and I couldn't let go of D. D, we had a lot of us older heads nicknamed him or had him, we called him just D, not Donnie, but D. I would go over to Quickset, that's where he worked for his sister and his brother-in-law, and I would visit him there while he was working. And they say he did a perfect job on every job. He made little boxes, he filled those with bolts or nuts or whatever, and he learned how to operate scales. And I've asked Myrna, you ever get a complaint? Every box goes out of there perfect. And so Donnie could learn a lot, but he missed a lot of opportunity when he didn't get to go to schools like children that are special today have the opportunity to go to. There's no telling what Donnie could have accomplished, but he accomplished a lot because he gave so much love to all of us. So I was able to visit over there, and we'd have lunch together, and Tim and Terry and I'd go take him to lunch every now and then. He loved his soup beans and cornbread and stuff like that, and we still I got to keep contact with him. And I guess when COVID came along, his days kind of got limited to coming over here, and I still would see him, and I love to visit with him, and I love his family. They're just like family to me, because I saw how they took care of him so well, and their mother and father and brother-in-law rather, they made sure Donnie had every single thing he could ever dream of. All these fire trucks and things that he loved, he had. So I'll end with telling you, that guy's close to my heart. And to Chief Ridley, rest in peace, my friend. You've blessed every person in this room's life time again. And now you're with Mom and your sister, and they're all happy again for that reunion. And God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
In general, about Ronnie, and then I just want to relate to you what I was here for, the experiences that I had with Ronnie. And obviously, none of y'all, none of me, none of us would be here today if we didn't feel the same way that Ronnie Short told you. We loved Ronnie. I mean, he was a hard guy not to love. But, you know, Donnie was special. Some would say he was mentally challenged. That was an in vogue term for a while, probably not anymore. So I don't mean anything negative by saying that, but he had some issues. And, you know, the deal with him counting, I was part of the ones that tried to teach him how to count, and 10 was as high as we could go. You know, the next day he came back to work, you couldn't go any higher than 10. That was all he could do. His mind just didn't work that way. But at the same time, he was kind of a savant, if you know what I'm talking about. You know, you could ask Donnie anything. Well, tell me about engine 7. Well, he could tell you, you know, when it would fall, where it's stationed, the type of truck it was, the engine, the motor, whatever you want to call it, the pump capacity, and he could do that about every piece of apparatus here. Well, I could barely do it on one I was assigned to. So, and I thought I was normal. Maybe I wasn't. But Donnie could do that. And in fact, when I was a training officer, well, first, let me back up a minute first. I want to start when I first made lieutenant. I came over here as lieutenant on the ladder truck. That was that day when the platoons were, all three chiefs were unhappy about Station 5, and they said they're going to replace everybody. Well, the second platoon did, the others didn't, so we caught hell from a lot of the other two platoons there for a while till we all became to be friends. But where'd Ronnie go? I'm going to tell on Ronnie.
Right there.
Right here. Oh, there you are. The first day I was here, brand new lieutenant, and Ronnie and I down here, and you know, we finished the cleanup, the morning cleanup and all that stuff, and Ronnie said, you know, Louis, said those truck tires don't look too good. Said, you're a new lieutenant, your truck needs to be looking perfect. So I went over back there in the little supply room, and I got the tire black, and I cleaned those trucks, had those things shining. You know, they looked like new tires. Well, I'd been set up. I just didn't have enough sense to know it. So about 6 o'clock, I guess it was, when Donnie came walking in, I went over and shook hands, spoke to Donnie, because we'd already become friends before I came over here. And then I turned around and looked, and he and Ronnie are over there by the fire truck, by the ladder truck. And Ronnie's pointing at the tires, talking to Donnie, and every once in a while pointing over to me. And I said, I've been had. I've been set up. So sure enough, here comes Donnie. And he was hostile. He wasn't. He came over to me and got right up in my face and started poking me on the chest like that. And he said, you don't back them tars. Me, I back those tars. That's not your job. That's my job. You don't back them tars. So I said, okay, Donnie, I'm sorry. I apologize to you. I shouldn't have done that. I won't do it again. And I said, are you mad at me? He said, no. I said, you okay? I said, you okay? And I said, you sure? He said, yeah, you okay? We're okay. I said, how about a little kiss on the cheek? No. we used to tease Donnie all the time. Said, how about a little kiss on the cheek, Donnie? No, can't do that. When I was assigned as a training officer at the, what they call it, academy, now we call it the training center then, and we thought, well, we'd have a little fun out of recruits and give Donnie some. Were you in that class?
I had him once.
Well,
92.
Tony Monica was the training chief that time, and he was out, so I don't know, on vacation or whatever. And so we, in a daily schedule, we had an hour right after lunch, I think it was, for our apparatus class. Captain Donnie Ridley, instructor. Well, they didn't know what the crap was. There was about 20, 21 people in there, something like that, and they're looking around. Of course, we all just happened to be in there for the class. Usually we've been in the office, but, you know, we thought this was important, I guess. And they just didn't know what was going on, because they told us later that some of them thought that this was an old captain that just had trouble speaking in front of people, and we were trying to force him into doing it. Well, that didn't have anything to do with it. We were just having fun. There was one guy in the class, Don, I can't think of his last name now. Anyway, his father was a firefighter here. Garrison. And he had told Don about him. So about 2/3 of the way through the class, Don figured it out. And during the break time, I think he clued them all in. Because they were a little hostile to us, because they thought we were mistreating Donnie. No way in the world we would have mistreated Donnie. It just would not have happened. Well, the interesting thing, that after the class is over, we're in the office talking, and Donnie came in. Of course, he's, dressed out, how he was. And we were sitting there talking, and he came over to me and said, McComas? And I said, yeah. He said, I want to be a major. I said, you want to be a major? He said, yeah, I want to be a major. I said, well, Donnie, I can't make you a major. He said, I want to be a major, I want you to do it. I said, how the crap am I going to do this? But I said, well, Donnie, I can't make you a major. He said, I want to be a major, I want you to do it. So I said, okay. So I called Chief Caton. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't make him a major. And I told him what's going on. And he said, well, he's been a captain a long time. I guess we can make him a major. I said, well, what do you want me to do? He said, you got an extra major's badge? I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, give me your badge and we'll buy you another one. Well, I gave him my badge, but they didn't buy me another one. That was on me. So I took his captain's badge off and slipped it in his jacket pocket and put that major's badge on him. And, he puffed up, that chin was kind of quivering a little bit like when he got nervous or excited. And he was happy, I was happy, everybody out there was happy because Donnie was happy. It did us good too. And then, I guess the next thing I was going to talk about was after I became chief, I don't know, a year or two, whatever, we were back out at the training center, probably for a recruit class graduation. I can't remember for sure what it was. And after it was over, and of course, you know how Donnie all looked perfect again. And he came over to me and he said, Combs, I said, I want to be battalion chief. I said, why you want to be battalion chief? You don't want to be battalion chief. And so I said, Donnie, you're a major. Ain't that good enough? No, I want to be battalion chief. So I said, okay. Well, when are you going to do it? I said, well, Donnie, I'll do it as soon as I can. You ain't gonna, no, I'm not gonna forget. I'll do it. So he just went on a while there making sure that I wasn't gonna forget. Like he was gonna let me forget. And so after that, I called down to the council clerk's office and asked her to put it on the docket for Thursday night. It's a council meeting, regular council meeting. Let the mayor write a proclamation calling it Donley Ridley Day or whatever it was. And that night, the clerk, read the proclamation from the mayor, and all the council members. By then, I made sure they all knew who Donnie was and what was going on. And so somebody made a motion in a second, and it passed unanimously, obviously. And so Donnie and I are standing up there at the front, and so after it passed, just like I did at the training center, I took his major's badge off, slipped it in his jacket pocket, took the battalion chief badge, pinned it on him, and then I thought, well, I did add a little spice to it. I stepped back one step and rendered the salute. Done it. And that changed kind of quivered a little again, like it did when he got excited. Well, the next work day, I guess, that the first platoon was on duty, Donnie was over here, of course, and the next morning, Pete Ward, who was a captain on Engine 5, called me from home or work or wherever he was, wasn't here. And he said, well, I guess you created a monster. And laughing, and I said, well, what did I do? He said, promoting Donnie. I said, what's wrong? He said, well, he came over here, came in like always. He took down the flag, he answered the radio call. And I said, Donnie, you gonna sweep the kitchen? No. He said, what do you mean? He said, that's one of your jobs. That's what you do. You sweep the kitchen. No. He said, why ain't you going to sweep the kitchen? He said, Chief don't sweep kitchens. And he said 2 or 3 times, the chief don't sweep kitchens. They don't sweep kitchens. You sweep kitchen. So I think Pete swept the kitchen. Well, I had a note there what I was going to say. And I left out the first part, but I'll say it anyway. I was just going to tell you that before I started, that I'd make you the same promise that Elizabeth Taylor made to each of her husbands, that I wouldn't keep you long. So I hope I haven't done that. I love Donnie Ridley. Obviously you do, or you wouldn't be here. I appreciate him. He was a good friend, and he get mad. You're right. But the difference between you and me and Donnie, when I get mad, it takes me a while. I'm going to stay that way a while. But I asked Donnie, he meant no. And he wasn't. As far as Donnie's concerned, he forgot all about it. Only Jesus is the only other one I know that can do that. I can't.
Amen.
Anyway, it's my pleasure to be with you here today, and I thank all of you for coming.
Quick. And of course the chiefs, they can't hear what I'm getting ready to say. You all ignore what I'm but yeah, I'd get fired today if they knew what I was doing. But Donnie come over here and we'd hang out, and one of the things that nobody's mentioned that he really, really enjoyed was having a song written after him called Walking Man. And he loves sitting out there with all the music and everything, but I won't mention who was in the alarm room, but I'd call somebody up the alarm room and I'd say, hey, we got flat tires on aerial 2, don't have to take it off of duty, but we're going to be able to get it fixed. And I'd walk over there and I'd say, hey Chief, they need us up on campus. Get in the truck. And buddy, we'd pull out, and I had little walkie-talkies that nobody else could hear, and you ought to hear him on there. This is Chief Ridley, we're 1097, and we need this or we need that. Buddy, he was one of the best. And to look over there and see him in charge of that big aerial 2 truck and make those runs and everything, you couldn't put a price tag on it. And I thank the Lord that put me in a position to have Donnie Ridley as one of my bestest buddies. And the day that he passed was one of the rough ones. So thank you all for coming and showing how much we all love him.
I was assigned here in 1974, it was my very first assignment, and nobody warned me about Donnie coming in that night at 6 o'clock. So when he came in, I was like, well, who's that? So the guys told me that he was used to be a captain or whatever, and he got hurt at a fire, and so he comes up to visit with us and show him a lot of respect. So when I heard him talking, I was like, you know, I didn't know what to say. So I just kind of stayed back a little bit for the first few days, and then, make a long story short, I was here long enough to really get to know Donnie. The thing Donnie liked the most was to be messed with. On days that we had training or we had a fire or two, and we just didn't have the energy to mess with him, he would just go home at 8:15 or whatever. But the days that we just messed with him the whole time he was here, he'd go around, shake everybody's hand, thank you, thank you, thank you. So this particular night, whatever night Emergency used to come on, anybody know Donnie, he loved that TV show Emergency. So we'd get him a Pepsi, he liked his Pepsi, we'd sit him down up there, turn the TV on, turn it on the right channel, and there's another guy that was here then, Dick Craig. He and I would be in cahoots. So when that first scene came on the TV, he was around the corner where the breaker box was, and I just waved my hand and he turned the breaker off, which would turn the TV off. And you know how Donnie, so we'd say, Donnie, go over there and whack on top of the TV and it'll come back on. So he'd walk over there, whack, and I'd wave the stick, he'd flip that breaker on. Donnie'd go back and sit down, just about the time he got his butt in the couch, turn it off again, and he'd be out. We did that. I don't know how many times we did that. But anyway, he was a true joy. I grew up with a handicapped sister, a mentally handicapped sister. So I just had a special place in my heart for Donnie. And he'll be missed more than anybody will ever know. And I'm sorry that for all the folks that never got to meet him, they missed out on a blessing. So anyway, I won't keep you.
Well, you all have already heard a multitude of stories about Dee. I had the pleasure of making, he had the pleasure of making one of my first runs with Donnie. And that happened by way of EC1. I was riding with Tom Charles and Howard Bowman at the time. And of course, Tom was kind of the father of the entire 3rd Platoon, depending on who you talk to. But such great guys. But that particular night, we made a run just half a block down here to the library lounge. And in there on the dance floor, somebody had a seizure. And so the 3 of us went in with the first aid kit, assessed the situation, checked out. And of course, me being the sub on the truck, I didn't even have a year on the job yet. They sent me out to get the stretcher. So I get out to the stretcher, and there is the most sharply dressed captain I've ever seen. He's got Lexington Fire badge, captain's insignia on his hat, everything, and just very prim and proper. And he said, I said, I beg your pardon, sir, I couldn't quite understand you. And so I made his best. I said, well, we're just taking the stretcher in, there's a patient in there, and so on, and explained the situation. And he seemed satisfied with that, so I go ahead and take the stretcher into the thing, and we get the patient loaded, and so on. And later at the hospital, I asked Captain Charles, I said, Tom, can you tell me anything, or I said, Captain, excuse me, could you tell me anything about that captain that I met tonight outside the lounge? And he said, oh, well, he went through the same story that many of you heard in pre-entry, and you just heard from Chief McComas about the injury at the fire and so on. And so I fell hook, line, and sinker. When we got back to the station, all my other sub-buddies were still there first couple of weeks of recruit class. And I told them about the captain and the story and the whole fire incident and so on. And of course, Tom, in the meantime, is telling the whole rest of the station, which was at that time probably about 6, 8, 10 people, about how they got me. And so eventually they, of course, let me back in on it. And, but I got to know Donnie just the same. Later, when I was riding 205, I got to spend a lot of time over here at Station 5. And many of those 5 to 7 or whatever it was, 5 to 8, 8:15 evenings, I got to be a part of that as well. And some of the most fun times were spent, especially when we did the music, the bluegrass music. Mike Carr initiated all of that, and if he gets a chance, he'll probably tell you all about that. But Donnie was special, and it was my privilege. And of course, Chief McComas told you about 2 promotions. Well, it came time that Donnie wanted to be deputy chief. Well, he had to wait on Chief Caton to retire, because there had only been one that I'd ever known about, and that was Chief Caton. So finally he retired. I guess he saw his chance, so it was time to make Donnie a deputy chief, and I had the privilege of doing that. Many of you were here at that time out on the apron. You've probably seen pictures of it, and we had a Donnie Ridley Day that day as well. To his family, he did a great job. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Except for running short. My brother rode Engine 7, which is back here, and I would come over when I was a teenager and visit with Donnie and stay around, and we got to know each other right well. I came on the fire department in 62, 63, and went to Station 7. After I was out there for a while, they sent Walter Short out and Joe Preston. You probably all heard about Joe Preston. But Donnie knew them from being over here. Every night on the 3rd platoon, Donnie would call. And you couldn't understand a word he was saying. Chippy, 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 chippy. And I said, okay, can I come out? I said, anytime you want to, come out, Donnie. So finally he gets somebody to bring him out. And the first thing I know, he's sitting up in his seat, Engine 7. Engine 7 was his favorite truck, no doubt about it. And he said, Chippy, can we ride? I said, okay. And it takes me probably for the 2-lane road then. You all probably didn't believe it was a 2-lane road. The apron went way on out to the other side of the street just about. So we get in the truck, and I drive him out. He'd sit over there, back of his arm up in the window, and just smile. I look up and down the road, nobody's coming. I said, okay, Donnie. And he hit that sign, woo! I said, let off, you know. And we back in. And we sat there for a few minutes, and he'd say, Chippy, Chippy, can we go again? Can we go again? I said, okay, Donnie. I'd take him out there, and finally I'd have to say, Donnie, this is the last time now we'll go out and come back. But next stop, I just loved it, man.
My car.
I got several stories, but I'm gonna try to keep it short. I know everybody's back's probably hurt from standing up, but like mine. But Donnie got in trouble. The fireman got in trouble one time over Donnie. This was before I came. Gillum might remember, but he would come down here, and one of his jobs at home was to mow the yard. And one day it was hot, and he couldn't get the lawnmower started. Well, he got to using a little bit of rough language, trying to start the lawnmower. His mama overheard him. And man, she come out there and jumped on him like a June duck on a June bug. And she come leading him down the street, brought him in here. Bill Tom Smith was standing in the back there. And she walked up to Bill Tom and said, I want you to know something. Donnie come home using some awful rough language. And I asked him where did he learn that at? And he had done it before. He said, I want you to know right now, he's not coming back down here. Y'all gonna teach him that kind of stuff. And Bill Tom come after Crawdad and boy. He said, wait a minute. He said, we don't do that to the boy. He said, we'll promise we won't. I'll make everybody promise. All 3 shifts. No cussing around Donnie. And Donnie said, yeah, Mom, she said, if you tell everybody here on all 3 shifts and make them promise that they won't, Donnie, I'm going to let you come back down here. But the best story I've got on him, one of them, is they were getting ready to retire old Earl too, and they put it on the news. And said, anybody want to come by here and check the truck out, off the street or whatever. It's hot summertime, bays are up. Well, these 2 young couple come walking in with me, I think Gillum, Rick Duncan, Phil Overley. We'd all sitting, maybe Charlie was sitting around the back here around the ping pong table. And these 2 couples come walking in the front door. Well, Donnie's standing up there looking like the chief of the fire department, They walk up to him, said, excuse me, sir, is this the truck that they're putting on the news that they're going to retire soon? Donnie goes, yeah, Earl 2, and there's what, Earl 1, life Earl 2, and they kind of looked at one another, said, old chief's in the ate too many fumes or something. And said, no, and I asked him again, he went, well, I don't know, and he pointed back there to us. I said, let me handle this, boy. I walked up there and he said, is this the truck they're talking about on the news that they're getting ready to retire? I said, yeah, this one. They throw their hands up and hit the best one is when we done that song. I want to give Randy Smith credit. He done a great job on filming that video. Jeff Nance was playing the lead guitar. Stuart playing rhythm guitar on the video. I was playing harmonica. But they had, I think it was a Metro Employees talent show, and I put our name in. I had to do that song. Well, I had to okay it with his mother. And she quizzed me on it. And I said, look, Miss Ridley, I said, if you'll let him do this, I said, I'll make sure you got a front row center seat. And Teresa Isaacs was the mayor at the time. And she loved Donnie, and she'd do anything for Donnie. She said, I'll take care of that. So we went down there, and the only part Donnie had was every time I'd say, he don't need no money, he ain't made no plans. Everybody knows him. He's Donnie Ridley, the walking man. And I said, when it comes to that part, I said, you come to the microphone going, I'm the walking man. Okay. Oh, that toy, he was excited. Like I say, that chin was quick. Well, we started into the song, and when he'd come to that part, he'd make sure he'd stand there close, and he'd take my microphone and go, I'm the walking man. Well, the crowd was going crazy, and they loved him, and the place was almost packed. And so when it got to the last one, I said, his name is D. Don Ridley, and he said, and he was way on the other side of the stage over. And here he come. You remember that movie Tom Cruise slid across that floor? That's the way he did. He come running across through there, and he slid in front of that microphone. He went, I'm the walking man. And the house, it brought the house down. But I loved the guy, and I didn't let nobody mess with him. Of course, we didn't anyway. But and on a radio check sometimes, he'd be here to do the radio check in the morning. If it's close to Christmas or Easter or whatever, I'd say, Donnie, get ready. And he had that mic in his hand. I'd say Merry Christmas, everybody. Earl Tunes, Merry Christmas, everybody. Well, it wouldn't be long. City phone rang. It'd be Carl. Keep him off the radio. Get him. But I love the guy, I had a lot of fun with him, and I know we're all gonna miss him.
One, two, three.
Station 5, 10-4.